Unit 4, Cognitive, Learning, and Intelligence Theories. 4.1 Introduction. In this unit, we will study the theories of cognition, learning, and intelligence proposed by different psychologists and scientists. Before starting the discussion about theories related to these aspects, let us discuss the meaning of cognition. The term cognition originated from the Latin word cognoscere, which means to recognize or to know. Hence, we can say that cognition is a process of utilizing information and attaining knowledge. In this unit, we will study theories of cognition given by Jean Piaget, Vygotsky, Brunner, and the information processing theory in detail. Further, we will discuss learning. Learning can be defined as a permanent change in behavior due to an experience. It can also be defined as acquiring new knowledge, skills, or values that lead to a change in one's behavior. Learning may be goal-oriented and/or driven by motivation. One may learn things consciously, or it may occur without conscious awareness. In this unit, we will discuss some important learning theories, such as the theories of connectionism, the trial and error theory, and the theories of learning by conditioning. Along with these theories, we will also discuss the importance of the social learning theory by Albert Bandura. In the later part of this unit, we will study two important theories of intelligence, the theory of multiple intelligences by Howard Gardner and the triarchic theory by Sternberg. The word intelligence derives from the Latin word intelligere, which means to understand. Intelligence is defined by the American Psychological Association as the attempt to clarify and organize a complex set of phenomena, Perloff et al., 1996. Another definition of intelligence by Mainstream Science on Intelligence states that intelligence is a general mental capability that includes the abilities to reason, plan, solve problems, think abstractly, comprehend complex ideas, learn quickly, and learn from experiences, Gottfredson, 1997. Hence, we can say that intelligence is the ability to learn, whether formally or informally, and to solve problems. After studying this unit, you will be able to explain cognitive development in human beings, understand the viewpoints of various theories on learning, discuss the social learning theory in detail, and describe different types of intelligence. 4.2 Cognitive Theories. Many psychologists working from a cognitive perspective focus on children's mental processes. They investigate the ways in which children perceive and mentally represent the world, how they develop thoughts and logic, and how they acquire the ability to solve problems. In this section, we will discuss some important theoretical approaches to cognitive development. First, we will study the theory of cognition proposed by Jean Piaget. After that, we will review the social learning theory by Lev Vygotsky and the constructive theory given by Brunner. Lastly, we will study the information processing theory. All these theories share a strong focus on how children think, the development of problem-solving processes, and how such cognitive activities contribute to the overall process of child development. 4.2.1 Piaget's Cognitive Development Theory. Swiss cognitive theorist Jean Piaget, 1896 to 1980, was concerned with how children form concepts or mental representations of the world, and how they manipulate these concepts to plan changes in their internal world. Piaget believed that children's thinking developed in a series of increasingly complex stages, each of which incorporated and revised the preceding stages. Below, we will discuss this theory in detail. Study the basic concepts of the cognitive development theory. Piaget used concepts such as schema, mental representation, accommodation, equilibration, adaptation, assimilation, and organization, tying them together to explain cognitive development. The basic concepts of Piaget's theory are: 1. Schema. According to Piaget, a schema is a specific psychological structure or an organized way of making sense of experience. It can also be defined as a pattern of action or a mental structure involved in acquiring or organizing knowledge. According to Piaget, the schema in infants is a pattern of actions, such as sucking, grasping, eating, holding, and throwing. After the age of 2, a child's schema may include objects as well as actions. A child forms schemas through exploration and experience. By using schemas, the child learns to identify objects, predict events, plan actions, and pattern behavior. 2. Mental representation. mental representation is an internal interpretation of information. According to Piaget, around 2 years of age, the infant starts thinking before acting. The two most important mental representations are images, mental pictures of objects, people, and space. Concepts, categorizing similar objects or events together. For instance, we can retrace our steps when we misplace our watch using a mental image, or we can copy another's behavior long after observing it. 3. Adaptation. Adaptation is the process of building schemas through direct interaction with the environment. Burke, 2002. According to Piaget, adapting to the environment is a biological tendency found in all organisms. It involves two complementary processes, assimilation and accommodation, which occur throughout an individual's lifespan. 4. Assimilation. Assimilation is the process by which new objects or events are interpreted according to existing schemas. It is a way of organizing knowledge. For example, a preschooler sees a truck and calls it a car, because the concept of a car is already well established in their thinking. Another preschooler might correctly identify it as a truck, having already developed the schema for vehicles. 5. Accommodation. In this process, an individual modifies old schemas and creates new schemas that better fit the environment. Sometimes objects or events cannot be assimilated into already existing schemas. In accommodation, a child changes existing schemas or ways of thinking when faced with new ideas or situations where the old schemas do not work. For instance, instead of calling a truck by the wrong name, the preschooler searches for the correct term and begins to recognize that some four-wheeled objects are not cars. 6. Equilibration. Piaget theorized that when children can assimilate new events into existing schemas, they are in a state of cognitive harmony or equilibrium. When something does not fit into their existing schemas, their state of equilibrium is disturbed, and they try to accommodate it. During this time of rapid cognitive change, children are in a state of disequilibrium. Once they modify their schemas, they return to equilibrium. This back and forth movement between equilibrium and disequilibrium is known as equilibration. Whenever equilibration occurs, better schemas are created. 7. Organization. Organization is the internal process through which schemas are rearranged and linked together without direct interaction with the environment. Children organize existing schemas and create new ones, developing more complex cognitive systems. Piaget's stages of cognitive development. Jean Piaget hypothesized that children's cognitive processes develop in an orderly sequence or series of stages. As in the case of motor development, some children may be more advanced than others at particular ages, but the developmental sequence does not normally vary. Similarly, cognitive development may be faster in some children than in others, but it follows the same sequence. Piaget identified 4 major stages of cognitive development. These are: 1. The sensoromotor stage, birth to 2 years. The sensoromotor stage begins with inborn reflexes and simple actions that help the infant meet her or his needs. Piaget believed that the child develops the schema of actions first and later the schema of objects. During this stage, the infant interacts with and adapts to her or his physical and social world by means of assimilation and accommodation. There are very simple and limited numbers of schemas at the initial stage, so the child unites these schemas to make them more complex and numerous. At first, an infant's thoughts and ideas are based completely on experience of the world through the 5 senses, that is, touch, smell, taste, sight, and hearing, sensory experience, and direct physical involvement with objects, motor experience. That is why it is known as the sensoromotor stage. Piaget further divided this stage into 6 substages, which are: 1. Reflexive schemes, birth to 1 month. Piaget regarded the newborn's reflexes as the building blocks of sensoromotor intelligence. At first, infants suck, grasp, and look in much the same way, irrespective of the experience they encounter. 2. Primary circular reactions, 1 to 4 months. In this substage, infants start to gain voluntary control over their actions by repeating chance behaviors that are largely motivated by basic needs. They begin to vary their behavior differently for hunger and uneasiness. However, these actions are centered on their own body. It is also believed that the baby makes efforts to imitate others. Secondary circular reactions, 4 to 8 months. In this substage, Infants try to repeat attractive effects in the surrounding world caused by their own actions. They start imitating familiar behavior observed in their surroundings. 4. Coordination of secondary circular reactions, 8 to 12 months. In this substage, infants combine old schemas into new and more complex actions so that they can engage in intentional, planned, or goal-oriented behavior. The concept of object permanence also appears in this substage. Infants begin to understand that although an object is out of sight, it still exists. Infants are able to find a hidden object in the first location where it is hidden. 5. Tertiary circular reactions, 12 to 18 months. In this substage, infants repeat behaviors with variation, provoking new outcomes. For example, a child might hit a drum with a stick, then hit a block with the same stick, and then hit a table, enjoying the different sounds produced. The concept of A not B search becomes more accurate. Toddlers search in several locations to find a hidden object. 6. Mental representation, 18 months to 2 years. In this substage, sensory motor development advances with mental representation. Infants become capable of solving advanced object permanence problems, such as finding a moved object while it is out of sight. They also demonstrate deferred imitation, the ability to remember and copy the behavior of people who are not present. Infants are now involved in make-believe play, acting out imaginary activities or behaviors. 2. The preoperational stage, 2 to 7 years. During the preoperational stage, there is a major shift from the action-oriented schemas of the sensor-motor period to schemas based on the use of language and other forms of symbolic representation. In this stage, children's thinking begins to follow certain predictable logical operations or rules, but these are not fully mastered. Children also begin to develop the ability to solve problems with words, as well as actions. Pre-operational children experiment with symbols to represent the world in several ways. One manifestation is deferred imitation. For example, a 3-year-old named Priya hears her dog barking one morning. She does not respond to it then, but later in the afternoon, she wrinkles her face and says, "Woof, woof, woof." Symbolic thinking during this stage is also evident in children's dramatic play. For example, in playing house, a girl may play the role of her mother, while a boy may play the role of his father. The advancement in thinking emerges due to the incredible development of language and mental activity that occurs between the ages of 2 and 7 years. However, Piaget felt that there are still major differences between a child's thinking at this age and the mental functioning of an adult. The most important limitation of preoperational thinking is egocentrism. Piaget believed that children mentally represent the world by focusing on their own viewpoint and are unable to understand others' perspectives. This results in animistic thinking, the belief that non-living things have lifelike qualities similar to living things. Another limitation of this stage is the inability to conserve, meaning children do not understand that physical characteristics of objects remain the same even when their appearance changes. Additionally, this stage is marked by irreversibility, meaning children cannot mentally go through a series of steps during any process and then return to the starting point by following the steps in reverse. For example, if a child is shown 2 identical glasses filled with the same amount of water, and the water from one glass is poured into a broader, shorter glass, the child in the preoperational stage will believe the taller glass contains more water. Piaget's conservation tasks further highlight this limitation. Tasks involve liquid conservation, identical amounts of liquid in different shaped glasses; mass conservation, clay balls reshaped into different forms; length conservation, 2 identical sticks arranged differently; weight conservation, objects of the same weight reshaped into different forms. Children in the preoperational stage cannot conserve mass, weight, length, or liquid, which they gradually master in the concrete operational stage. This version corrects all. The concrete operational stage, 7 to 11 years. After children become skillful at making representations, they begin learning how to coordinate them logically. As they do so, they enter the concrete operational stage. According to Piaget, operations are logical relationships among concepts or schemas. During this stage, children are able to use logical relationships for the first time. This new ability, however, is largely limited to objects and events that are real, tangible, and concrete. The changes in thinking associated with the concrete operational stage have been illustrated in the above subsection. At this stage, children are able to conserve and serialize. Their mental processes now reflect reversibility. For the formal operational stage, 11 years and older, during adolescence, children learn to think logically, abstractly, hypothetically, and scientifically. At this point, they enter the formal operational stage. They are able to perform operations on operations and solve problems that require them to systematically consider all possible alternatives, whether real or hypothetical. They are also able to think about their own thinking. These new intellectual capacities allow them to think about complex and abstract issues such as morality, politics, economics, and religion, which are central to the development of an adult identity. The main features of the formal operational stage are I. Hypothetico-deductive reasoning. This is a problem-solving strategy used by adolescents or children at the formal operational stage. According to this, children are capable of thinking about all possible solutions to a problem. They test all the possible solutions mentally and select the best one for a particular problem. In contrast, children at the concrete operational stage are unable to think about alternative solutions to a problem. T. Abstract thinking. Another main characteristic of the formal operational stage is abstract thinking or propositional thought. According to this, adolescents are able to evaluate the logic of verbal statements without referring to actual circumstances. Burke, 2002. This ability further leads to two main characteristics of adolescence. A. Imaginary audience. According to Piaget, adolescents at this stage are very conscious of their physical appearance. They feel as though they are always on stage and that every activity they engage in is noticed by others. This makes them very self-conscious, often spending hours in front of the mirror. Adolescents are highly sensitive to comments about their physical appearance, and sometimes such comments can be mortifying. Personal fable. Adolescents at this stage are convinced that people are observing and thinking about them exclusively. Consequently, they start believing that they are special and unique. This leads them to think more about themselves in relation to others, resulting in egocentrism. The feelings of the imaginary audience and personal fable typically begin during the transition from the concrete to the formal operational stage. However, these feelings tend to disappear as adolescents progress further in this stage. Application. Piaget's theory has been applied to teaching practices in curriculum design and education, particularly at the elementary level. This theory offers specific recommendations for each developmental stage. For example, for children in the sensory-motor stage, a stimulating environment with suitable objects to play with should be provided. For children in the pre-operational stage, learning activities should not involve problems of classification, ordering, location, or conservation. Additionally, the theory suggests some principles. 1. Explanations of reality should align with the cognitive development stage of the child. 2. Children should engage in activities and situations that require adaptation, i.e., assimilation and accommodation. 3. Learning materials and activities should correspond to the motor and mental development of children, see Fig 4.4. 4. Children should not be asked to perform tasks that exceed their cognitive abilities. 5. Teaching methods should actively involve children and present challenges appropriate to their stage of development. Fig 4.4. According to Piaget, learning materials and activities should align with the motor and mental development of the child. 4.2. Vygotsky's social cognitive theory. The Russian psychologist Lev Vygotsky, 1896-1934, proposed the social cognitive theory. It explains how culture, the values, beliefs, customs, and skills of a social group is transmitted to the next generation of that group. According to the theory, social interaction, especially interaction between children and adult members of society, is necessary for children to acquire the ways of thinking and behaving that make up a community's culture. Fig 4.5. According to social cognitive theory, interaction between a child and a caring adult is important for the cognitive development of the child. Vygotsky believed that as adults and more expert peers help children to master culturally meaningful activities. The communication between them becomes a part of children's. Children use this communication within themselves to guide their own thoughts, actions, and to acquire new skills. Burke, 2002. Vygotsky's theory was influenced by the study of children's cognition by Jean Piaget. He agreed with Piaget that children are active and constructive beings, but he viewed cognitive development as a socially mediated process, as it depends on the support of others provided by adults or peers in the social group. Another important concept of social cognitive theory is the zone of proximal development, ZPD. The zone of proximal development refers to a level of development attained by children by engaging in social behavior. Lev Vygotsky believed that the potential for cognitive development depends on the ZPD. The development of an individual's ZPD depends on their social interaction with members of their social group. Hence, we can also say that adults and more skilled peers can help a child to complete tasks that they cannot do alone. Fig 4.6. According to Vygotsky, learning should be planned according to the ZPD of the child. It is facilitated by explanations, demonstrations, and verbal prompts. Vygotsky said that children guide themselves by speaking to themselves. He believed that language acts as the foundation for all higher cognitive processes like problem solving, planning, categorization, classification, reasoning, etc. He termed this self-directed speech as private speech. Children use private speech to regulate their own thoughts and behavior. Application. The theory of social cognition can be applied in the following ways. A. According to this theory, social interaction is the basis of cognitive development. Hence, two important points should be kept in mind to enhance social interaction. 1. Intersubjectivity. Intersubjectivity is defined by Newson in 1975 as the processes whereby two participants that begin a task with different understandings arrive at a shared understanding. Additionally, intersubjectivity can be described as a shared understanding among two or more individuals whose interaction is based on common interests and assumptions. Rogoff, 1990. Later, these dialogues become internalized and form the basis of internal speech. 2. Scaffolding. Scaffolding refers to the process of adjusting the quality of aid and assistance during the process of learning. Another important feature is guided participation. Guided participation goes beyond simple scaffolding. In this process, adults support children's efforts by providing them with diverse opportunities to learn instead of simply giving instructions. B. The theory of social cognition is valuable for education as it emphasizes the importance of social context and interaction. According to Vygotsky, teachers should plan the learning process according to the ZPD of each child, and learning should be facilitated through explanations, demonstrations, and verbal prompts. Cooperative learning is an important application of this theory, as children can teach and help one another according to their abilities. Abernashler 4.2.3, the Constructivist Theory. The Constructivist theory was proposed by an American psychologist named Jerome Seymour Bruner, 1915 to 2016. Bruner's work on cognitive psychology and his cognitive learning theory was influenced by the theoretical research of Jean Piaget and Lev Vygotsky. This theory states that learning is an active process during which the transformation of information takes place. In this process, individuals construct new concepts on the basis of their existing concepts. Bruner supports the idea of categorization. He said that human beings understand concepts in terms of their differences or similarities. They form a hierarchical arrangement of related categories. According to him, people have two basic modes of thinking, the narrative mode and the paradigmatic mode. In narrative thinking, people's thoughts are sequential, detail-driven, and action-oriented, whereas paradigmatic thinking is logical and scientific. Bruner, 1986, said that paradigmatic thoughts make use of procedures to ensure verified references and to test for empirical truth. According to this theory, there are three modes of representation which are as follows. I. Inactive representation. Inactive mode of representation is action-based, that is, knowledge is acquired through motor responses. For example, one can understand a concept more easily if it is demonstrated and performed by one's own hands instead of through verbal description. Iconic representation. Iconic mode of representation is image-based. That is, knowledge is acquired through visual images or responses. For example, people can better understand data if it is represented graphically, such as a diagram of the digestive system, which helps students understand better than simple text. Symbolic representation. Symbolic mode of representation is language-based. That is, knowledge is acquired through symbols like words, letters, and numbers. For example, 5 times 4 is easier to understand than saying 5 times 4. Application. Bruner's constructivist theory can be applied and utilized in different instructional situations. 1. Instructions should be related to the existing concepts and experiences of the learner so that the learner is motivated to learn. 2. Instructions should be organized in such a manner that students can easily understand. 4.4 Information Processing Theory. Information processing is an approach that views the human mind as a symbol manipulating system through which information flows. It regards cognitive development as a continuous process. Burke, 2002. Information processing theory focuses on the precise, detailed features or steps involved in mental activities. Like a computer, the mind is viewed as having distinct parts that make unique contributions to thinking in a specific order. In the human mind, a number of functions occur between the input, stimulus, and the output, response. These include storage and processing, which can be identified as parts of human thought. Store model of information processing. The store model is a model of mental functioning that views information as being held in 3 parts of the mental system for processing: the sensory register, working or short-term memory, and long-term memory. The information is processed at different speeds in each part. The sensory register and working memory have limited space for memory storage. They can hold only a certain amount of information for a short time, whereas long-term memory stores information permanently. See Fig 4.7. Components of the store model. 1. Sensory register. Figure 4.7 shows the store model of information processing in human thinking. According to this model, when people try to solve a problem, they first take in information from their environment through their senses. This information is held briefly in the sensory register, the first memory store. The sensory register records information exactly as it was originally received, but the information fades or disappears within a fraction of a second unless the person processes it further. 2. Short-term memory. Information to which a person pays special attention is transferred to short-term memory, the second memory store. Short-term memory corresponds roughly to momentary awareness, or whatever the person is thinking about at a particular instant. Short-term memory can hold only a limited amount of information, typically about 7 pieces at one time. After about 20 seconds, information in short-term memory is either forgotten or processed further so that it moves into long-term memory. 3. Long-term memory. Information can be stored permanently in long-term memory, LTM, the third memory store. However, doing so requires various cognitive strategies, such as rehearsing information repeatedly or organizing it into familiar categories. Unlike short-term memory, long-term memory probably has unlimited capacity for storing new information. The challenge lies in retrieving information or recalling it. Interestingly, most of us can remember certain events that occurred long ago better than many more recent events. The information processing model provides a useful way of understanding thinking. There are certain processing functions that change as children grow older. As they grow, children experience several cognitive changes that allow them to process information more efficiently and comprehensively. 4.3. The learning theories. To understand how learning takes place, various explanations have been proposed by a number of scientists and psychologists. Each theory emphasizes one or another aspect of the learning process and is therefore helpful in explaining it. Learning theories not only explain the learning process, but also the way the mind develops and how personality is formed. Hence, knowledge of these theories provides useful insights into how human beings learn and why they behave as they do. Learning is generally defined as a relatively permanent change in observable behavior that results from experience. In this section, we will discuss some important theories of learning. 4.3.1 Theories of Connectionism. In these theories, learning is described in terms of connections that occur in different situations. These theories emphasized associations that lead to learning. They believed that, to learn something, a bond should be established between two or more experiences so that the second experience tends to connect to the first one. Asheville 4.3.2 Trial and Error Learning Theory. The trial and error learning theory was postulated by Thorndike, 1874 to 1949, in 1932. As he was working on cats, he found that the smell of fish motivated the cat to get out of the puzzle box. In this process, the cat made all kinds of movements, jumping, biting at the bars, scratching at the door, and so on. During this process, by chance, the cat put its paw on the latch and got out of the box. When the cat was put back into the puzzle box, it took less time to come out, making the correct movement in comparatively less time than earlier. Eventually, the cat understood the technique to open the puzzle box and could do so as soon as it was placed inside. In this way, the cat learned to open the box. According to Thorndike, the various random movements made by the cat to get out of the box led to this type of learning. He called these movements trial and error movements, which include one correct movement that results in opening the puzzle box. Every movement has some effect, but if it is not the desired one, the connection is weakened. The connection is only strengthened if the action leads to the desired result. This is called learning, i.e., the strengthening of the connection of the response or set of responses made during the trial. The sequence used in the trial and error method is, first, various random activities; second, the discarding of movements that are not useful; and lastly, the selection and learning of the movement that leads to the desired result. Application. Thorndike suggested 3 laws of learning. 1. Law of effect. It states that if any particular action gives the desired result and leads to satisfaction, then there is a tendency to establish and fix that activity. However, if that activity does not yield the desired result, it generates a feeling of dissatisfaction, leading to the discarding of that activity. Thorndike, 1932, found that when a response is accompanied or followed by a satisfying state of affairs, the strength of that connection is increased. 2. Law of frequency. It states that when any particular action is repeated a certain number of times, it tends to be established permanently. 3. Law of recency. According to this law, one can easily repeat an act that has been recently performed because it is fresh in experience. 4.3.3 Theories of Learning by Conditioning. Conditioning learning theories include 2 main approaches: classical conditioning by Ivan Petrovich Pavlov, 1849 to 1936, and operant conditioning by B.F. Skinner, 1904 to 1990. Classical conditioning theory. The term classical conditioning describes a type of associative learning where there is no consistency between response and reinforcer. Classical conditioning is a simple form of learning in which an originally neutral stimulus comes to elicit a response usually brought forth by a second stimulus as a result of being paired repeatedly with the second stimulus. Like many other significant scientific discoveries, classical conditioning was discovered by accident. Russian psychologist Ivan Pavlov, while researching the salivary reflex in dogs, discovered that reflexes can be learned or conditioned through association. Pavlov's dogs began salivating in response to the clinking of food trays because the clinking had been paired repeatedly with the arrival of food. Pavlov then carried out experiments in which he conditioned his dogs to salivate to the sound of a bell, which had been paired with food. Application. Psychologists use classical conditioning to help 5- and 6-year-old children overcome bedwetting. A special pad is placed beneath the sleeping child. Whenever the pad is wet, an electric circuit completes, causing a bell to ring and waking the sleeping child. After several repetitions, most children learn to wake up before they wet the pad. In this bell and pad method for bedwetting, psychologists repeatedly pair tension in children's bladders with a stimulus, the bell, that wakes them. The children learn to respond to bladder tension. The bell is an unlearned or unconditioned stimulus, UCS. Waking up in response to, here's the corrected version. Waking up in response to the bell is an unlearned or unconditioned response, UCR. Bladder tension is initially a meaningless or neutral stimulus. Through repeated association with the bell, bladder tension becomes a learned or conditioned stimulus, CS, for waking up. The waking response to bladder tension, the CS, becomes a learned or conditioned response, CR. Behaviorists argue that much emotional learning is acquired through classical conditioning. For example, touching a hot stove is painful, and one or two incidents may elicit a fear response when a child looks at a stove or considers touching it again. Theory of operant conditioning. Operant conditioning describes one type of associative learning in which there is a contingency between the response and the presentation of the reinforcer. In classical conditioning, children learn to associate stimuli so that a response made to one stimulus is then made in response to the other. But in operant conditioning, children learn to operate on the environment or to engage in certain behaviors because of the effect of those behaviors. The operant conditioning learning theory was proposed by B.F. Skinner, based largely on research with animals. He trained rats and pigeons to press a lever in order to obtain a food reward. In such experiments, the subject was able to generate certain motor outputs, the response, R, for example, running around, climbing, resting, or pressing the lever. The experimenter chose a suited output, for example, pressing the lever, to pair it with an unconditioned stimulus, such as a food reward. Often, a discriminative stimulus, DS, for example, a flashlight, is present when the RUS contingency is true. After the training period, the subject shows the conditioned response, CR, for example, touching the lever, even in the absence of the US, if the RUS association has been memorized, see Fig 4.9. Fig 4.9, Application of Operant Conditioning Learning Theory. Application. The starting point in classical conditioning is limited to a small number of inborn, involuntary responses, such as the sucking and eye blink reflexes. These are also called respondent behaviors. In contrast, the starting point in operant conditioning can be any response that an individual makes while voluntarily reacting to the environment. These are called operant behaviors and include crying, smiling, head turning, and even sucking if controlled by the individual. Because there are more operant behaviors, operant conditioning has been much more widely applied in understanding and influencing child and adolescent development. Below, we discuss various applications of this theory. 1. Reinforcement. B.F. Skinner introduced one of the central concepts of operant conditioning, the concept of reinforcement. Reinforcers are stimuli that increase the frequency of the behavior they follow. Most children will increase the frequency of the behavior patterns that earn them consequences, such as a hug, an A grade on a test, attention, and social approval. These consequences serve as reinforcers. Some children learn to conform their behavior to social codes and rules to earn the attention and approval of their parents and teachers. Other children, ironically, may learn to misbehave, since misbehavior also draws attention. Children may especially learn to be bad when their good behavior is routinely ignored or is not good enough to earn approval. Various behaviors, such as vocalizing, smiling, and looking at specific objects, have been conditioned in very young infants. Let me know if there's anything else. Most of the time, food, social approval, and attention serve as reinforcers. The different types of reinforcers are: 1. Positive reinforcers. These increase the frequency of behaviors when they are applied. Food and approval usually serve as positive reinforcers. 2. Negative reinforcers. These increase the frequency of behaviors when they are removed. Children often learn to plan ahead so they do not fear that things will go wrong. Fear acts as a negative reinforcer because its removal increases the frequency of the behaviors preceding it, such as studying for a quiz. 3. Knowledge of results. This is often an effective reinforcer with children. Many children work hard to improve skills in spelling, math, and other areas simply for the sake of improvement. 4. Intrinsic reinforcers. These come from an internal or intrinsic motive to master skills. Children frequently learn how to solve problems and manipulate objects for the pleasure of doing so. In other words, children often find reinforcers for behaviors within themselves rather than outside. 5. Extrinsic reinforcers. These are external rewards that serve as concrete representations that something of value has been accomplished. For example, A common extrinsic motivational strategy is to give tokens or prizes to students when they perform a desired behavior. 6. Continuous reinforcement. In continuous reinforcement, the desired behavior is reinforced every time it occurs. This method is used in the initial stages of learning to reinforce positive or desired behavior. Later, the reinforcement schedule is converted to partial reinforcement. 7. Intermittent reinforcement. This type of reinforcement is given only part of the time the child gives the desired response. It is often used after continuous reinforcement once the desired response is conditioned. The goal is to reduce the number of reinforcements necessary to encourage the intended response. For example, in the classroom, the teacher might initially praise children each time they write numbers and letters correctly. Once basic skills are acquired, reinforcement can shift to intermittent praise. 8. Partial reinforcement. During partial reinforcement, the reinforcement is given only some of the time. Behaviors learned with this type of reinforcement are more resistant to extinction, though acquisition takes longer. Extinction. Extinction of specific operant behaviors results from the repeated performance of that behavior without reinforcement. After a number of trials, the operant behavior is no longer displayed. For example, children may throw temper tantrums or cry at bedtime to seek parental attention. If these behaviors were reinforced by parental attention, they can be extinguished within a few days by ensuring parents stay out of the bedroom after putting the children to bed. By changing the reinforcement contingencies of the problem behavior, the behavior can be eliminated. Punishment. Punishments are aversive events that suppress or decrease the frequency of the behaviors they follow. Punishing events may be physical, e.g. spanking, verbal, e.g. scolding or criticizing, removal of privileges, e.g. denying a hug or kiss from a parent. It is usually preferable to reward children for desirable behavior rather than punish them for unwanted behavior. By ignoring misbehavior or using timeout, brief isolation, one can avoid reinforcing children for misbehavior. However, punishment is usually undesirable because 1. Punishment in itself does not provide an alternative or acceptable form of behavior. 2. Punishment tends to suppress undesirable behavior only in situations where it is guaranteed to be delivered. 3. Punished children may withdraw from the situation. Severely punished children may run away, skip class, or drop out of school. 4. Punishment can create anger and hostility. 5. Punishment may generalize too far. For example, a child severely punished for bad table manners may stop eating altogether. Making reinforcement effective. 1. Immediate reinforcement is more effective than delayed reinforcement. 2. Explain the reason for the reward or punishment. 3. Consistent reinforcement is more effective than inconsistent reinforcement. 4. Negative reinforcement or punishment should be preceded by a warning. Insulting or bashing children often makes them think about revenge rather than remedy. Public punishment in particular should be avoided. 5. Rules and penalties should be clear, fair, and consistent so children are more likely to strive for rewards and avoid punishment. 4. Behavior modification. Behavior modification involves changing human behaviors considered maladaptive or dysfunctional. It uses empirically demonstrated techniques to improve behavior. Examples include reinforcing adaptive behaviors and reducing maladaptive ones through positive reinforcement, employing negative reinforcement or punishment to discourage undesirable behavior. 5. Shaping behavior. Shaping behavior is a process of moving from unskilled to skilled performance. Children can learn complex behaviors through shaping, where small steps toward the behavior goal are reinforced. For instance, when teaching a child to use the toilet, the parent might first reinforce the child for simply sitting on the toilet, even if they insist on wearing a diaper. Over time, reinforcement is gradually adjusted to encourage further steps toward independent toilet use. 4.4 Social Learning Theory. In the previous section, we learned that behaviorists tend to limit their discussions of human learning to the classical and operant conditioning of observable behavior. However, social learning theorists such as Albert Bandura, 1925-present, have conducted numerous experiments that show that much of children's learning also occurs by observing parents, teachers, other children, and even characters on television. 4.41 Theory. Bandura's social learning theory emphasizes the importance of observing and modeling the behaviors, attitudes, and emotional reactions of others. Kearsley, 1994. Bandura, 1977, states, learning would be exceedingly laborious, not to mention hazardous, if people had to rely solely on the effects of their own actions to inform them what to do. Fortunately, most human behavior is learned observationally through modeling. That is, from observing others, one forms an idea of how new behaviors are performed, and on later occasions, this coded information serves as a guide for action. According to this view, change is a result of mutual interaction among the child's observable behavior, the cognitive, biological, and other internal events that can affect the child's perceptions and actions, and the external environment. See Fig 4.10. Figure 4.10. According to social learning theory, learning occurs when children observe others, like mothers dressing up. 4.2 Concepts. The main concepts of social learning theory are: 1. Observational learning. Observational learning is the type of learning that is an area of interest for most social learning theorists and may account for most human learning. It occurs when children observe how parents cook, clean, or repair a broken appliance. It occurs when children watch the teacher solve problems on the blackboard. Observational learning does not occur because of direct reinforcement. Children can learn without engaging in overt responses at all. Learning will occur as long as children pay attention to the behavior of others. The processes underlying observational learning are: attention. This includes watching and observing. Retention. This includes cognitive organization and motor rehearsal. Motor reproduction. This includes physical capabilities, self-observation of reproduction, and accuracy of feedback. Motivation. This includes external and self-reinforcement. Observer characteristics. These include sensory capacities, arousal level, perceptual set, and past reinforcement. 2. Identification. Identification may be viewed as a broad process of imitation through which children acquire behavior patterns similar to those of other people. 3. Models. The people after whom children pattern their own behavior are models. The traits that encourage children to identify with models include warmth, competence, social dominance, and social status. 4.3 Basic Potentials of child development. According to social cognitive theory, a child's development depends on 5 basic potentials or capabilities that all human beings possess. These are: 1. Symbolic capability. Symbolic capability enables children to think in symbols and use language. 2. Vicarious capability. Vicarious capability allows children to learn indirectly from the experiences of parents and other role models through observation. Vicarious capability is influenced by attention processes. These influence what children selectively observe in their environment. Retention processes. These enable children to transform and restructure information from role models. Behavioral production process. This process translates children's symbolic conceptions of thoughts into an appropriate course of action. Motivational processes. These reflect the various incentives and disincentives in observational learning. 3. Forethought capability. Forethought capability enables children to anticipate the likely consequences of future actions, set goals, and plan courses of action to achieve desired outcomes. 4. Self-regulatory capabilities. Self-regulatory capabilities enable children to replace external motivations, social and moral standards with their internal controls and directions. 5. Self-reflective capabilities. Self-reflective capabilities enable children to analyze their experiences and reflect on their own thought processes. So 4.4.4 Applications. The application of social learning theory is discussed below. 1. Self-regulation. Self-regulation means controlling one's own behavior. It is the workhorse of human personality. In this, Bandura suggested 3 steps. I. Self-observation. It means one observes one's self-behavior and keeps track of it. I. Judgment. It means one compares oneself with the standards or norms set by the social group. 3. Self-response. If one does well in comparison with the norms or set standards, one gives a reward to oneself. If one is not up to expectations, then one gives a punishing self-response. These self-responses can range from noticeable, working on holidays, to more concealed, feeling shame or pride. Self-regulation highly affects the self-concept or self-esteem of the person. For example, a person who is able to meet all the standards of life will have positive self-regulation, like self-praise and self-reward, which leads with satisfying self-concept and high self-esteem. On the other hand, a person who faces failure in life and is not able to meet the standards will always punish himself or herself and hence have a poor self-concept and low self-esteem. 2. Therapy. There are two types of therapies based on Bandura's social learning theory, which are 1. Self-control therapy, 2. Modeling therapy. 1. Self-control therapy. Self-control therapy is based on the technique of self-regulation. It has been seen that for simple problems like smoking, overeating, etc., this technique is very successful. The process of self-control therapy includes behavioral chart. A behavioral chart is a technique in which people maintain a track record of behavior both before and after change begins. By maintaining a diary or chart, people can keep a detailed track of their behavior. This helps to identify the factors that are associated with a specific behavior. For example, one eats more while watching TV, or one smokes more when traveling. Environmental planning. Environmental planning means that by taking cues from behavioral charts and diaries, people can start giving attention to their environment, such as avoiding behaviors that lead to bad habits or behavioral problems. Self-contracts. Self-contracts mean people should make a deal with themselves regarding the execution of the self-regulation process. It is advisable to write down the contracts in which details are spelled out clearly. For example, I will go out for a picnic if I control my eating habits, else I will stay at home for the weekend. 2. Modeling therapy. Modeling therapy means following a person who has a psychological disorder but is dealing with the issue in a very productive manner. In this, the person with more effective and productive solutions will act as a model to others. 4.5 Theories of Intelligence. Intelligence theories deal with the ways cognitive processes operate in various environmental contexts. Two of the major intelligence theories are the American psychologist Howard Gardner's multiple intelligence theory and Sternberg's triarchic theory of intelligence. 4.5.1 Theory of Multiple Intelligence. The theory of multiple intelligence was proposed by Howard Gardner, 1943 till date in 1983, to define the concept of it more accurately and address scientific methods which claim to measure intelligence. It states that intelligence does not sufficiently encompass the wide variety of abilities humans display. According to this, a child who is a good singer is not necessarily a good dancer. Gardner originally identified 7 components of intelligence. He argues that these intelligences are relatively distinct from each other, and each person has some level of each of these 7 intelligences. More recently, in 1997, he added an 8th component of intelligence to his list. Following are the categories of intelligence proposed by Gardner. Body kinesthetic. It is an intelligence that deals with the ability to use one's physical body well. People with this intelligence learn better by doing and are good at physical activities. These people often learn best by doing something physically rather than reading or hearing about it. The persons with this type of intelligence can be good dancers, athletes, surgeons, actors, builders, or soldiers. Interpersonal. It is the ability to sense others' feelings and be in tune with others. The persons with this type of intelligence seem to be extroverts and understand others' feelings and temperaments. Effective communication and empathy are 2 basic characteristics of these people. They enjoy discussion and debate. These persons can be good salespeople, teachers, clinicians, politicians, religious leaders, social workers, or managers. Logical mathematical, as the name suggests, it is the ability to learn higher mathematics and to handle complex logical arguments. These people are good in mathematics, chess, computer programming, and other logical or numerical activities. It is believed that persons with this type of intelligence have a higher IQ. Usually, persons with this intelligence can become mathematicians, engineers, doctors, or economists. Verbal linguistic. It is the ability to communicate well. perhaps both orally and in writing, sometimes in several languages. These people are good at reading, writing, telling stories, and they can even remember the dates along with words. They can learn foreign languages very easily because they have high verbal memory and recall. They are good at understanding and manipulating syntax and structure. This intelligence is higher in writers, lawyers, philosophers, journalists, politicians, and teachers. V. Intrapersonal. It is the ability to know one's own body and mind. These people are generally introverts and prefer to work alone. They are highly self-aware and capable of understanding their complex inner feelings. These people can be good philosophers, psychologists, theologians, writers, or scientists. Vi. Visual spatial. It is the ability to know where one is relative to fixed locations, the ability to accomplish tasks requiring three-dimensional visualization and placement of one's hand or other parts of one's body. They have a strong visual memory band and are often artistically inclined. They have a very good sense of direction and good eye-hand coordination. These people can be artists, engineers, architects, sailors navigating without modern navigational aids, surgeons, sculptors, or painters. V. Musical. It is the ability to learn, perform, and compose music. These people display greater sensitivity to sounds, rhythms, tunes, and music. Since the auditory component to this intelligence is very strong, they learn best through lectures. These people can be good instrumentalists, singers, conductors, disc jockeys, or composers. Vi. Naturalistic. This type of intelligence was added to the theory in 1997. It is the ability to understand different species, recognize patterns in nature, and classify natural objects. These people have greater ease in caring for, taming, and interacting with animals. They may also be able to differentiate changes in weather or similar fluctuations in natural surroundings. These people can be good scientists, naturalists, conservationists, gardeners, or farmers. Applications. The theory of multiple intelligences has focused mostly on children, although it applies to all ages. Gardner discussed the application of the theory to school programs. 1. Education with a broader spectrum. To live a meaningful life, one needs all the 8 intelligences. Hence, it is important for teachers to stress all the intelligences. It is necessary to extend sufficient opportunities for the students to work. 2. Developing indigenous and flexible programs. According to Gardner, understanding should be clear and deep, based on performance, exploration, and creativity. Hence, the curriculum should be planned according to local surroundings and should be flexible according to the learning abilities of learners. There should be more than one type of assessment. Further, the theory suggested some principles which are as follows. I. Individuals should be educated and encouraged to learn things related to the intelligence they possess more strongly. I. Assessment should measure all forms of intelligence. IV. Instructional activities should be planned according to the form of intelligence. 4.5.2 Sternberg's triarchic theory. The triarchic theory was formulated by Robert J. Sternberg, 1949 till date, who conducted research on human intelligence. The theory is made up of the following 3 interacting subtheories, see Fig 4.111, which are 1. Componential subtheory. This subtheory emphasizes the information processing skills that underlie intelligent behavior. Its main elements are strategy application, knowledge acquisition, metacognition, and self-regulation. Burke, 2002, said that although children use these components according to their internal capacity, it is also a function of the conditions under which intelligence is measured. 2. Experiential subtheory. The experiential subtheory states that highly intelligent individuals are able to process information more expertly in comparison to less intelligent persons. It is seen that an intelligent person learns a new task more rapidly by making strategies automatically, so that working memory is freed for more complex aspects. Burke, 2002. Contextual subtheory. The contextual subtheory states that intelligent people use their information processing skills more efficiently to meet the personal needs and demands of their worlds. If they are not able to acclimatize to the situation, they search and find new contexts to solve the problem. The cultural influences on the person's intelligence are also considered by this theory. Intelligence, cognitive learning and intelligence theories. Fig 5.111, triarchic theory of intelligence. Sternberg's theory tries to simplify the complexity of human mental skills. He said that the current tests for assessing human intelligence have limitations, as they are not able to assess the complexity of the human mind. Sternberg et al., 2000, said that children often use different abilities in academic tasks than in non-academic everyday situations. Yet out of school, practical forms of intelligence are vital for life success, and they help explain why cultures vary widely in the behaviors they regard as intelligent. Application. Instructions for learning should be socio-culturally relevant to the person. 2. Subject matter to be learned should have links with real-world behavior. 3. Instructions should include strategies for coping with specific situations. 4.6. Let us sum up. The unit began with the cognitive theories proposed by various psychologists and scientists. The cognitive development theory of Jean Piaget provides the platform for other psychologists to work on the human cognitive system. He gave the concepts of schema, mental representation, adaptation, assimilation, accommodation, equilibration, and organization to explain cognitive development in human beings. Piagetian stages of cognitive development are the sensory motor stage, the pre-operational stage, the concrete operational stage, and the formal operational stage. Then we studied Vygotsky's social cognitive theory. He viewed cognitive development as a socially mediated process as it depends on the support provided by the adult or peers of the social group. The terms zone of proximal development, ZPD, and private speech were first introduced by Vygotsky. We studied the applications of social cognitive theory like intersubjectivity, scaffolding, guided participation, and cooperative learning. Further, we studied the constructivist theory by Brunner, which supports the idea of categorization. We also studied the information processing theory, which describes how we learn things. Further, in the course of this unit, we dealt with some important theories of learning, like the theories of connectionism, which emphasize more on association, which leads to learning, trial and error theory by Thorndike, and theories of learning by conditioning. Thorndike suggested 3 laws of learning: the law of effect, the law of frequency, and the law of recency. We studied 2 popular conditioning theories, classical conditioning theory and operant conditioning theory. The former theory states that specific behavior can be learned by conditioning through association, whereas the latter theory states that children learn to operate on the environment or to engage in certain behavior because of the effect of that behavior. The application of operant learning theories is through concepts like reinforcement, extinction, punishment, behavior modification, and shaping of behavior. Further, we studied the social learning theory, which states that most human behavior is learned observationally through modeling. The basic concepts of this theory are observational learning, identification, and models. We found that social learning theory provides the base for self-regulation, self-control therapy, and modeling therapy. Finally, we studied the 2 theories of intelligence: the theory of multiple intelligences by Gardner, which describes 8 types of intelligence: bodily kinesthetic, interpersonal, logical mathematical, verbal linguistic, intrapersonal, visual spatial, musical, and naturalistic. Sternberg's triarchic theory of intelligence is composed of 3 subtheories: the componential subtheory, experiential subtheory, and contextual subtheory. We have studied how these theories help in improving the education system and facilitate the learning process.